Hey, everybody. Welcome to the OG's Power Hour. We don't have John this morning. He's busy helping people try to be the best that they can be. He's working with Tony Robbins on a date for destiny right now. So we do have the masterful Mr. Toad with us. We're talking more roots in the soil helps your plants. So what do I mean by that? Because we're going to just jump right in as always. The more roots, the more exudates, the more horizontal gene transfer there is with the more plants. That's why a lot of people use cover crops. Do you use cover crops at all, Tony?
I don't because I'm in tents now. They're just too small for me to do it in the size of tent I have. I replace my soil and then move it outside, and then outside I'll use I like to use my strawberries as the cover crop, but not indoor. I try to build a fresh soil each time, and then it gets recycled into my greenhouse.
Okay. Well, the thing is, I wanted to bring up something that you do. You don't just clone cannabis plants; you're cloning other plants as well, tree species as well. So, understanding that is all its own separate biology. Are you adding any of that biology into your other pots when you build them?
Um, what do you mean by that? I do always inoculate all my soils when I do any type of transplant, especially from clones, so that the roots have a jump start on the system. I use a product called VAM. It's a vascular mycorrhizal, 7 different species of endo mycorrhizal. Plus, I like to use EM1, which is also in a form of inoculant itself, being basically an IMO form in a liquid that's made from inoculation, and doing labs also, which will help you with pulling in native lactobacillus from the atmosphere around you, which is, I feel, better than trying to buy a bottled one that's made somewhere away from me. I prefer to have the bacteria and fungal species from my actual area, so they will help with drought resistance, basically the stresses that are in my natural habitat. They will help me benefit from in my garden by producing those and extending them into my garden.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do other trees. I do redwoods and lemon trees. I've done the Japanese maple that I've got out there. I've been keeping my lemon tree alive for 25 years through cloning. I clone it all the time. It came from seed from fruit that from a tree that was almost 70 years old. That was my godfather's. So I've been cloning that for 25 years. I just last year started doing my redwood trees, cloning those in an arrow system. Takes 6 weeks to get those to a full root to transfer into soil. And then once in soil, they take off. I sent one to Cheddar Bob's wife. It was about 18 inches tall, and it's already grown like 6 inches in the last 2 months from him putting it in his indoor vegetative space where that plant will grow fast. He's hoping to be able to plant it outside somewhere so him and his family can enjoy that plant in a natural habitat. One of the only redwoods in Maine.
Cool. Well, and we got to get some of those redwoods over onto the East Coast. They're really more of a moist West Coast thing for the mountains, but that
well, they used to cover the whole United States almost. The redwoods in our history, they were all over the North America, and they can handle those areas as long as you do, like we're saying, if you can get them introduced to the native bacteria and fungi in the area, they will have a symbiotic relationship with them, and they're going to be able to use endo and ecto. So since you're not probably going to be able to buy an endo mycorrhizal that's anywhere close to being localized to your area, taking a tree like he's done and putting it into his grow space and then using things like leaf mold from the area, it's going to help introduce that to different symbiotic fungi that'll help that plant latch onto that area much easier.
Oh, exactly. Like we don't have the herds moving the biology out of the water onto the land anymore, but collecting your local terroir, especially if you're collecting the areas that are close to the moisture where plants have the availability of drawing that up, you're going to be getting hopefully those or that biology in what you're collecting. And the local terroir, you can take pretty much any plant that'll survive in a temperate zone and put it into that temperate zone. As long as you allow that plant to grow and not kill it off, the biology from that plant that's in the plant is going to take over that area eventually.
Indeed. I see Ganja Man saying JDAM is the future. JDAM was just a renaming of his ancient farming techniques. We didn't get here without fermentation of plant matter. And the early humans from that went from hunter gatherers to farmers. I'm pretty sure they weren't calling it that. They were just farming.
Exactly.
It's an ancient technique we've forgotten, and now that as we reintroduce it to ourselves, people put new names on it, and it's all the same thing. Trying to utilize Mother Nature for the inputs that we need the correct way, understanding how a plant will break things down using fungi and bacteria, us speeding that up prior to putting it on the plant makes it far easier for that plant to assimilate it. So, and that goes back to the roots that you're talking about. There are so much more surface area on the root tips for them to find the nutrients, and being able to specifically use exudates to interact and talk with the fungi species, the mycorrhizal. They're able to find out that there's a pocket of nutrients farther into the system that they will send their roots out to, and once they get there, they'll slow down and start to devour that area using the exudates and the enzymes and fungi and the bacteria that are in that area to break those things down and chelate it into the system. Chelate it, I'm sorry. There's a documentary called What Plants Talk About, and in there they take some plants, they plant them in a box that has a tube they can put a camera in to watch the roots, and they put pockets of nutrients in the soil and watch as the roots grow slowly as the plant doesn't need as much of nutrients uptake. And then when it goes through a growth spurt, the roots will shoot out to find those pockets. And then once they find them, they'll stop until they've used up the nutrient that's available in that spot. If they needed more calcium or magnesium, they'll find those sections in the soil by utilizing the bacteria, fungi, specifically in those areas. They have them break it down through the enzymes in their systems, and then it basically gets absorbed. Then the plant utilizes that to make sugars and hormones. The hormone shift that can happen from just nutrient input, like using too much alfalfa and kelp. If you use too much of that in your soil system, you can increase how much different hormones that plant will produce at a specific stage, and it becomes a plant growth regulator or plant growth retardant, depending on what you've put on there. You'll start getting funny new growth, twisted. You might start seeing flowers pre-initiate because of the hormone boost or shift between gerbilic acid, auxins, and ethylene. Those three shifting too much on the endogenous level, and you'll start to see weird growth from epiphyllous leaf formation, where you'll see buds on leaves. Possibly seeing the new branches starting to shoot up from you because they think they're under shade avoidance because the oxygen levels increased. There's a lot of different ways you could steer your plant through the root system.
Well, and like Ganja Man says here, leaf mold is an important in starting compost. It's that biology that exists in there that's already starting to break down that leaf structure that is so important. I mentioned earlier about adding more biology in the soil. You mentioned you're putting in the mycorrhizae, etc. But I'm thinking more along like, okay, you say you're using an air cloner for doing your cloning. Have you considered taking that water, especially when it's different species that you're propagating, and watering that into your plants for the biology that those whatever you were cloning has put into that water? Have you ever
in the past? I have like using willows. That's how I used to start cloning. I used to, like, every Mother's Day as such, I buy my mom flowers, and usually in the arrangement there was curly willows shoots, and I would take those curly willows and clone them. I'd put them in with the other plants to clone with because they're going to introduce a lot more auxins into the system easily. And then once those rooted, I'd plant them outside. So I used to take those plants, and I would take the fresh tips off of the willows and crush them up and put them in EM1 and ferment them and make my own willow extracts that way, so that I could add a teaspoon of that every time I was watering in veg. Is the auxin something I wouldn't start adding during flower? It is something I would use during veg to increase how the pace of growth on lower limbs. The lower limbs will build up more auxins in them, and they will think they're under shade avoidance, will start to stretch and reach the rest of the canopy. So it's good for trying to fill out like a screen of green, increase your auxin levels in the veg cycle, so that the plant isn't just storing it in that one apical branch. Instead of having to cut that off, you could literally use a foliar application on the lower branches and increase the auxin levels there, so that the branches will start to shoot up and think that they're under more shade and need to reach the rest of that level, so you can fill the system easy.
Well, and that's where like I like the idea of having multiple different plants that I'm going to actually pull up some of and take the, like what Leighton Morrison did, taking the dirt, etc., off of the plant itself for the biology, bubbling that out and adding that into my soil structure to get those different biologies. I don't know if you saw the show with Luna. She had Tim Hannaran on, and he was talking about an experiment that was done where the ground was flooded, and the only plants that survived the flooding were ones that they had different, at least 3 to 4 different types of biology, or plants had been growing there and allowed to maintain the biology. Those are the only ones that survived, and that was all because of the excess of biology that was there. And that's really where I'm kind of going with all of this, is being able to grow out more plants, just a pot of seedlings of one thing, and take that up, wash it for the biology, and then add it to all your other soils, and then add another plant into that pot, and just continually keep doing that, rotating through different plants, especially the local plants to your area, like you were saying, ones that are drought resistant, and adding that biology into your system. And you've basically been doing that already with those willows, specifically for the auxins. What other things do you think would be good, say, for vegetative end or mid flower or late flower? Do you have any plants you could suggest growing out specifically for the biology in that area?
Well, so veg, it's easy. You can take a walk in the forest, and everything that's green in your area will benefit you with cannabis. It's really going to work. It's going to help you with that environment that you're already dealing with. But once you get into flower and stuff, it's going to be a little harder unless you live in a place that's got, say, a lot of flowering plants. If you don't have that, it's going to be a little more difficult to get yourself into something that's carrying the right hormones and nutrition and bacterial value. So what I would recommend on the flowering side is utilizing plants that you put into your area that have been there for a while, or it's like something like a cucumber that you grow every year, but in your area. Don't go to the store and buy cucumbers. Grow some in your area, skin them, char them, and use that as your potassium input and your phosphorus input. That there, along with the bacteria and biology that come with that plant from living and surviving in that area, will also increase the odds of your plants doing the same thing. So that's where making a fermentation from the leaf matter and not the fruit would help you. And then taking the fruit and processing it down in a compost pile and adding that as your top dress during flowering cycles. So you can, I like to use, I have a Nepalus here that's been here for 40 years since we've lived here. And until I lost my leg, I used to go over there and collect all the fruit and ferment that in a bokashi bucket. And then that would be introduced as a top dress to all my plants during mid-flower, because that fruit is packed full. It's a sink. It's packed full of flowering nutrients. So when you go over there, you're not going to get a flower off a plant that's just packed full of nitrogen. It's going to be packed full of the things that help create flowering plants: calcium, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium. And those are what I would want to put in there. I would try to find things that are in the stage that I'm looking for or grow naturally in that stage. If it's an annual, if it's a perennial, each one of those will have a stage that it grows in, like an evergreen. Let's say if I'm in a indoor setup, I could take an evergreen in the wintertime here and chop that stuff up and compost it and utilize that in my veg garden, because that plant's always has the ability to stay green. It's something that I'm trying to get to happen in my own garden. So I utilize that along with like leaf molds, because leaf molds are invaluable. You go collect multiple different types of leaves that are slightly moist at the base of trees in your area, put that in a bucket, and let that ferment over with some water if you wanted. You can seal that. You can do that with bark. You could take bark and inoculate it with EM1 and then fill the bucket filled with water and seal it so it's anaerobic, and then dry that out. And when it dries out, it will re-inoculate and come back to life for you, and you can use that as a top dress. That's wonderful. That I learned that watching some of Stamets, Paul Stamets video. He did a video on
that. Okay, so what you're doing is say I took a bunch of cannabis leaf, bunch of cannabis stalk, threw it in the bucket with water, seal it up for a couple of 3-4 weeks, and then you're saying to open it up, basically
drain it off, and then dry that again in like on a tarp, let it dry in the sun, and you can utilize that chopped up into your system. It's going to be inoculated with all kinds. And it's, especially if you're growing cannabis, if you put cannabis back on it, it's the perfect nutrient for it, that plant. And even if you do it through strain specific inputs, if you could grow enough of one kind and put that back on the plant you're growing, that plant absorbed what it needed on its own genetic basis, not just its cannabis. It's that particular chemovar. That plant itself has a very specific chemical makeup, and it has the ability to pull more. Some plants pull more nitrogen, some pull more calcium, and given the correct nutrient, those plants will store that in their system, the leaves. So us taking the leaves, usually for years, we're yanking them and throwing them away, when in fact, if we would have took those leaves and put them in, say, an EM1 or into some kind of an EMO liquid, we'd be able to ferment those into a perfect fertilizer for our plant at that stage. So if you're looking for a flowering stage, what's stored in the leaf in that plant grown up to that point, it's storing everything it needs to do that. So taking the leaves from that plant and utilizing it back into the same system is a really good thing.
Well, have you looked at the medicinal plants, like for the human body? You can get books on, what are the medicinal plants and what they give to you. Have you ever looked at that as ways to get calcium, magnesium, boron, manganese, etc.?
Yeah, same with like mushroom books. Like you can find out which mushrooms are safe for you to forage and use those to get increased chitosan in your system instead of having to have a bug farm. Like there's a lot of different ways you can do inputs. The same way with, I tell you about doing different gourds to get potassium and phosphorus from the skins when you char them. You'll learn those things reading all those books, finding out about the nutrient densities of the fruits when they're finished. And it's really easy to go back and, well, it's like doing a recipe. If I taste something and it tastes sweet, probably has sugar in it, right?
More likely,
So that's the way for us to go about doing this on a natural way. Like if I'm trying to feed my plant flowering nutrients, I probably wouldn't go for grass. Grass is going to be something that's high in nitrogen. It grows way too quickly. It's showing you by the pace of its growth, just like with doing seed inputs. Which one to use per stage will help you know which one's better for that stage. So like using corn and veg because of the pace of how fast corn grows, and using barley and flour. It's just that if the plant can make a better flour than it's when it's making its veg cycle, that's kind of how you can steer it just from knowledge. Or using alfalfa in the middle of the cycle so that you can pick up hormones that you needed and the triactinol that you're after and some of the waxes that plant will produce during that flowering cycle. You can introduce from some of those plants by like using alfalfa that's high in those things already. So utilizing a fermentation of it just jumpstarts that plant, or using something like Luna was using with her beet fermentation, something
Yeah.
that jumps the jasmonic response in the plant. That's going to alter how that plant produces trichomes because it's a defense mechanism. So if you can jumpstart that by giving the plant cues that it needs to do that instead of having it being attacked by bugs, it's a better thing. So now we get a plant that isn't stressed physically, but believes the system needs to increase these things because of a possibility of stress.
Yeah.
That's why we would use things like hairpin proteins, or just using damaged plants to increase the jasmonic response in a plant. Jasmonic acid will come increases when plants are damaged. So as a like an herbivore in nature goes through and eats a plant, that plant that was chewed on starts to produce more jasmonic acid as a chemical response, so it can tell other plants around it there's where I'm under attack. And then the other plants around it will start to produce it so that the animal that's attacking it won't want to continue to attack it. So defense mechanisms triggered by inputs can be done the same way as stressor from an outside source, right? Because we don't have to have the bugs or the animals to actually cause this to happen on the plant, when we can just take those systems into account and force it to happen.
Well, and that's the understanding the different plants and the different components that are in the plants and what they bring into a system is one of the keys to growing healthy, productive plants, whether that be cannabis or any other plant. Understanding, those different components and then different time that you need to add those components. Most farmers, they understand this. They've been doing this for, thousands of years. They knew when to add, which component into the soil system at different times to get the results that they want. Like you said, Tony, KNF is just a reinvigoration of old knowledge. I'm glad that it's out there. I'm glad that people are learning it, because it's a lost art that needed to be brought back so we can better our plants, and in bettering our plants, better our own bodies by consuming those plants.
Without that knowledge, we would have never became a civilization. We'd just be random tribes still fucking trying to go where the food is, until we figured out how to take the food around us that we were foraging for and bring it to a place where we could grow it without having to go through that trouble. Like if I have to go out into the wilderness to find the food I'm eating, I'm not only wasting calories and wasting time, I could injure myself. I could be attacked by an animal. By bringing it into this place we were safe, we were making it so that we were able to become a more civilized humanity. Not only that, but now we start to have the ability to have like entertainment, right? When your whole life's revolving around collecting enough seeds to fucking eat off of wild bushes and shit, you don't have much time to do nothing else but look for those fucking things, go to sleep and do it again. Well, once you know where it's at and what seasons to grow it in, you'd literally now have given yourself half a year's time to do whatever the hell you want. And that's when we're able to start building cities and start becoming the humans we are today. We have art and we have languages and stuff that we share with each other. Before, you only shared it with the small group you were with. You didn't have time to try to learn that shit from another one, because you were going to starve to death. You weren't going to make it. That traveling was dangerous. All those things, going from that traveling nomad humanoid, is why we are to where we are today. We couldn't have this size of a civilization without understanding farming and trying to learn about the plants and how to steer them. Because as we know, many wild plants don't have the ability to sustain us on the level of the ones that we have bred do. We can get a much larger fruit by learning how to breed. And it works across the board, from cannabis to watermelons. Like, you don't want the smallest carrot. You want the most nutritious and largest you can produce. And we can do that through selective breeding. And it's getting easier now. We're just not utilizing it, at least not in the cannabis. Crop steering with other plants is done all the time. They'll sequence the plant, find out which one does what, cross those together, and produce a seed stock that does what they want quickly. The stoner sits in a bedroom smoking his joint, thinking about what he'll do next, and doesn't know if any of the plants he's working with even carry a dominant traits for the things. They just look at a plant and go, that thing's purple and pretty. I think I'll cross it with another purple pretty plant and hope I get something that's what I'm dreaming about. When we could literally steer towards it by just sequencing what's there and understand we can knock off generations of farming and end up with the plants we need right now instead of 2 generations down the road, because we've fine-tuned farming to that point. Just like fungal dominance, we went from salts and everything to the organic version of it, because we know that it's not just the ion the plant's after. When you start finding out and realizing that the plant's a living thing also, it needs to have the essence of the nutrient that it's having for it to truly produce a better product. There's a reason I feel that we get a far better product from a living soil system than from just a sterile, dead water system. I can get something big out of that, but I can't get anything that I'm going to be able to judge as being the top grade. It's not going to have the correct terpene profile. I've done too much stuff to it artificially for that plant to represent as its true self. And that's why I feel like we get such a better representation of even the food we eat, like a tomato grown in an organic system by a farmer that let it ripe on the vine, or someone that pulled them when they were all green and then spread ethylene on them to get them to fucking ripen up for you. We all know a store-bought tomato tastes like shit. And that's because of the system it's being grown in and how it's being sold to us. They can't bring you a ripe tomato today. It's not going to make it to the shelf. That's why they have to pick them green and then force them to become ripe for you. But by doing so, the sugar content isn't there, and that's why the food doesn't taste correctly. Yeah. They're just doing an alteration of the hormones so that it appears to be done. And that doesn't give you a better fruit.
Well, like Corey says, full plant potential with living soil, you can't get it in most other systems now. Although Super Nessa may be getting close to that because he's using tree sap as plant food, which has already been processed by the biology and brought up from the deeper parts of.
But there's still no biology bringing it into the plant. It's still being. It's just being force fed through water, and that too much water is going to remove part of the essence of that plant. In my take, that's why I don't like doing deep water culture. Growing only in water, there's nothing alive in there. If you do introduce too much living stuff in there, the system becomes so hard to keep stable and clean that it becomes a chore. Like it's so hard to do. And then there's so much water that we're utilizing compared to a true organic system that's built up humic matter that can hold water for a long time, or like deep water reservoirs where putting the water below the plant and letting it wick up through it. They use far less water in that system. Deep water culture can work. It fails too easily for a lot of people. If they don't put the work in consistently, they will have some issues on there. As soon as there's a root slime buildup, your system's done. Like because it came down to the work ethic that got you there. If you allowed that slime to build up, you're not going to be the person that's going to want to get the slime off of there. So you're not going to go through the steps to get there. You'll probably just trash the system and then be pissed off that this doesn't work and that doesn't work. When in reality, farming takes work. It's the farmer that has to do it, not just the system. And Super Nessa, that's a great thing, having extra buckets. Most people will never buy a second setup. That's the way I used to do it. You just replace the fucking old one with a new one and then clean them other ones out and just rotate every 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks. But that's a ton of work. It's work I can't do no more in a wheelchair. That's why
I think that's again,
you can't utilize that same water for, say, 7 generations like a soil farmer. I know people that are like on their 16th one in a bed. You can't do that with water. It's just the water's gone once you do that, and you don't have a nutrient base anymore for doing so. And it's just hard. Utilizing that much water when people are thirsty out there is crazy. I feel like you could grow the same amount of herb with way less water.
Okay, I'm being text here from a buddy. He says, and he's watching, by the way. He says, bring up lake in Australia, Mackenzie Lake, that feeds itself from microorganisms and silica sand and pure water.
Yeah, but
So
that's a
that,
lake that has other living
yeah,
things in it. A hydro system isn't. They're just because it's water, they don't work anywhere near the same system.
yeah.
That's the thing. You're trying to shoot for a sterile system in a hydro setup. If you
Well,
start
and some
introducing all that
plants,
living, unless you're doing aquaponics, and then that's a different story. Now you've got something that's breaking down that fertilizer for you, and it's an organic fertilizer since it's coming from an animal that produces it, and then your plants are utilizing that with the bacteria that come along with it, and it's constantly being recycled. It's hard to build a system that big for everybody. Again, like I'm in a wheelchair, I can't do that. I can't clean them. I can't
yeah.
keep it going.
Well, and
And
your
there's a
lake
lot
is
of
more
people
of an
like that.
aquaponics system. It's not, like what
That's not a
Dino was
hydro. I would call
referring
that
to.
more of an aquaponic system. That's a
Yeah,
living water, a body of water. So that's a whole different story,
it has
100%.
its own ecosystem
But
already.
it also has the ability to completely fail from the wrong bacteria showing up, the wrong algae
Hmm.
showing up. You could wipe out that whole system.
Yeah, and
I
that's what
mean,
we're
I
seeing
feel like
across
with
the world.
cannabis is something that's utilized by so many sick folks.
Hmm.
Like I feel putting handicapped folks and sick humans that are dying into the most rigorous uh, work involved system is the worst thing I can do for them. I need to make growing for them as easy as possible. And if someone thinks that they have to wash and clean everything every 10 days and test and sterilize the water, make sure it's at a specific pH and check what the ppms are all the fucking time, it discourages growers. I've learned that from doing consultation for so long. I used to work at the club and run it. We had 4,400 members. I consulted regularly for about 400 of them. I'd be
Hmm.
going to people's houses all the time. And when you start seeing the amount of time they have to put into a system, the amount of work they're willing to put in, their knowledge base on what's happening, you end up making them fail. They just won't stick with it when that's the first way you put them into a hydro setup. That's just what I learned over time. It works
Hmm.
great for people that have the ability to do those and have the time, the want, the effort. That's not the average smoker.
Yeah, and
Just
like
isn't.
Super Nessa said, the old way took the whole tribe to achieve the result. That's a lot of man hours. It's working every
Yeah.
single day for that outcome. We're fortunate we're not trying to survive. We're trying to create a better medicine for ourselves and those around us. Um, and of course your living soil system has a lot of buffering built into it, like you were talking about, the roots searching out the different pockets of say calcium that are in the soil structure, and then using that up and then moving on to the next area. But you got to consider those exudates, and this is something that I've only learned recently from some of the new research, is 90% of the exudates the plant puts out, it actually draws back up. And so you could look at it as like the Colorado River, where the barges come back up, the barges go down. It's just the transfer of material, and I'm thinking a transfer of the biology as well, in that flush, as it puts the exudates out and then draws the exudates back. Um, what do you think of that particular thing, Tony?
That's exactly how it works. It's all about the carbon storage. So exudates are just carbon, and all the plant is a carbon pump. It's trying to store carbon and return it back to the earth.
Yeah.
It's also a reason why I don't like water. There's no carbon in water. We're utilizing something that it's just too much. It works. It's just way too much water in those systems for me. Um,
Yeah.
I would much rather teach someone how to build a living soil than how to kill water. It's going to save the earth in the long run. If I can teach you how to clean up the soil around you and utilize the bacteria and fungi in the area and the plants you grow to do the same, and then also to be able to utilize those same plants in your own system for food. You're killing multiple birds with one stone,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to become a soil farmer and not a tomato farmer, not a fucking a chili pepper farmer, not a corn farmer, but someone that knows how to till the earth. If I teach
Mm-hmm.
you that, you can go anywhere and grow any form of food there. It doesn't have to be the one you brought. You can find something
Yep.
in nature and grow that. There's no specific recipe that I have to remember to give anything. As long as I can make an active carbon-based soil that has enough calcium to support what I'm after, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to succeed. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I have, like I said, I don't need to have different all these meters. I don't need to have temperature. I don't have to have a water heater or chiller to keep stuff at a specific. There's so many things in a hydro system that if the power's out, I can't use it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be able to run that shit with by running tubes uh, from the creek over to my system and making sure it works. Like
Yeah.
nature, there's a reason nature uses soil mostly to grow shit. There are aquaponic systems out there.
Mm-hmm.
There the ocean is being one. There's a lot of things alive in there. We're just not growing none of the things that survive and thrive in water that much. So we're
Well, I
just
think
all
it's really a matter of, the water has a limited supply. The plants and animals would have consumed it. The point isn't that the nutrients aren't in the water, they can't regenerate. The point is you're putting it in a closed environment and it's using up that, and then you're having to replace the water. The water's there all the time. But I also wanted to bring up Smiley's comment here. Rhizophagy cycle shows the plant is trying to grow the bacteria for food, and that's really the plant's trying to grow its own food source. That's why terra preta in Brazil, they can harvest so much every year, and as long as they don't over harvest, it actually will grow itself back because it's producing its own lignin. It's producing, what it needs to survive and thrive in that environment, and that's really what we're trying to get with a living soil. And that's why latent systems is working so well, is the components are there for it to get to the point where it does produce the lignin for itself and for the plants that we put into it. It's just a matter of taking some time and allowing the system to grow and develop to get to that point.
and I'm super intrigued with Super Nessa's system using uh, STAPs to feed the
Yeah.
plant, because usually in a hydro system you're using a highly synthesized processed salt, and there's the other problem with hydro, how those were produced using uh, chemicals, like using
Mhm.
you basically using oil as the basis to make those things makes them way dirtier than we need them to be. When the plant, like you just said, the plant's making its own food. That's why
Yeah.
the leaves fall and get devoured by the system and return back to the earth, so that the next year nobody has to add more fertilizer to the forest. The forest feeds itself until the human comes along and decides he's going to do what he wants to it and kills it. Right?
Hmm.
If you go to the Amazon, there's nobody taking care of the Amazon. It does it itself until we show up, and then it starts to die. It knows what it needs and how much of it needs. Just like if you go and see a field and there's a meadow in the field, and every year there's different wildflowers that pop up. Some years you'll see a whole bunch of daisies pop up, or you'll see a whole bunch of dandelions, right? So when you see a bunch of dandelions pop up, that system is trying to reintroduce more calcium into the soil structure.
Yeah.
That's why it produced more of that plant that year. No one went out there and did it on purpose. The seeds were available and almost the same amount every year, but this year they exploded. And some years, each plant that has a different nutrient density will do that, so that that system can take what it needs from it.
Yeah.
When we have to force that through in a water system, it works great on a personal level. But if we have to feed humanity with that, we're allowing other humans to basically die from dirty water when we're giving plants copious amounts of clean water. It's just a bad thing in my heart. I'd rather give a kid a cup of water than a plant a fresh one. Going through all that process, the plant will drink the dirtiest water you can give it. We got it all backwards. When a kid in Michigan can't get a cup of clean water, but this fucking neighbor's growing in a hydro setup with fucking pristine reversed osmosis water. We're looking at shit the wrong way. They work. They're not the better option.
Yeah. Well, and Super Nessa is pointing out he's trying to create a system where he can take what's good in the sap, and take it out of the water to return the water, and then just add it as I think a more of a powdered amendment. But Ghetto Happy's going, polysaccharides in the sap, mineral content in the sap. It's all there because it's the plant itself that's bringing that up in the tree to feed itself.
It's how it's bringing nutrients up. Yeah, it has. It's just, only thing it isn't is the source in the sink, but it's the piping carrying all that carbon in the system. So using it, I understand how it can be used as a fertilizer. Using it in a hydro system is where I don't understand. Like how not that I don't understand it. I've never seen it. Is all I can say. But it intrigues me to do that because now you're using an organic based product in a system that was never thought to be able to utilize it well. That's an awesome thing. That's why I say, but it still comes down to on a massive level, we're wasting way too much water to grow that way. We could use those same saps in a soil system. That's how plants grow. There's a reason plants are making exudates. There's a reason it has a phloem and xylem system. It's to move the fluids around the plant to every part of the plant. It is what carries the water, the nutrients. It's what helps transpiration and move gases in the plant. Literally, that would be a killer fertilizer. More people should be utilized. I feel. I mean, we do when we use plant inputs. The sap's in the tissue. When I go take a fruit, it's filled with the sugars inside's the sap from the plant. And so we're doing that as an organic farmer. On the synthetic side, most are never doing that. So that's why it intrigues me with the system you do have, Super Nice. It makes a system that I feel shouldn't be utilized very often. The one that if you are utilizing, this would be the better way to do it, what you're talking about.
Now, as for the strength of it, Super Nessa, I think that would be, once you had an understanding of, don't be a moron and, have a specific formula to add it in and not that huge quantity where it's going to burn the plant. But that's something that you're researching, brother. So have fun. We're all intrigued about this, and I'm hoping that you can create something that we can all use in our soil systems. Because I don't think we need to or want the powers that be to go out and start tapping every tree that's out there because they just kill them off. So it's kind of a balancing act for that as well.
The freezing, it separates the water from the solids, the sugars, Super Nessa? Is that what happens by freezing it? Because if so, then you could take the sugar side that you're keeping and freeze dry it to make it a powder. And then that powder could be utilized in living soil easily as an input by the teaspoon or tablespoon or whatever's needed. And then allowed to basically cook. It's not cooking, but you're letting it heat up and come to a point where specific bacteria and fungi come active and start to break those things down with enzymatic action.
Well, like we're always doing, looking at different ferments. We're looking at the Korean natural farming. We're looking at the bakashis. We're looking at using EM1s. We're looking at all of these different techniques to basically draw out the nutrients from the plants we're composting and to have the biology break it down for us. That's really what's happening in all of these systems is we're using the biology to grab those compounds out of those cells, break it back down so they can build new cells, whether that's their own bodies or a plant cell or the cell of a trichome. It's all really boiling down to the biology and giving the biology what they need at the molecular level to build all of these things. And that's what I think a lot of the practices we're doing and informing people about is leading to that in the very end in performance of our own plants and finding that full genetic potential inside of the plant, inside of the biology that exists with that plant.
Full year
So
would be nice.
I'm just looking through the comments, guys.
That's what I'm trying to see. And like the plants are constantly making saps a copious amount. The healthier your plant, your Brix is higher. You'll start getting utation where the sap's actually seeping through pores in the plant's epidural layer. So it would be a good thing. I mean, I don't see how it's bad for you to utilize what the plant spent its whole life trying to make to feed itself as the fertilizer.
Yeah, I like what Grapinator here says. I want to try the sap from a sassafras tree and see if if feeding it to my plants will inherit a root beer taste. Yeah, I like root beer. So I think that's a definitely a possibility, because you're putting those components or making those components available. But Super Nessa, now we can start talking medical trees, and that's a lot of it. We're all the same base biology. It just different biology does different things in different environments. The same biology that can live in air, can live in water, can live in soil, can live in us. It's the bulk of everything that happened or has happened or will happen on this planet is based on biology creating the cells. What we're trying to encourage people to do is use the natural elements that are around you to feed not only your plants but ourselves as well. So,
Smiley's right. Aminos and all those, and the carbon that goes from it. Those are the things we'll be after.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing, there's everything we're after is actually there in, abundance in nature, because that's how she has designed her system. You go to the rainforest, and like Tony was saying earlier, everything's there. That leaf mulch is there, and then under that leaf mulch is a different layer and a different layer, and down into the soil structure. Mother Nature figured this out. She's built the system. We're the ones that are screwing it up more than anything else, and we need to focus more on looking at what she's done and helping her do it, to get that biology, to get that organic material back into our soils globally, not just in our cannabis grow, but as every crop out there wants to be better. She wants to always get better. And we've been getting in the way of Mother Nature being able to do that with the practices that we're using in our modern society. So what do you think, Tony? Where would you go to get a variety or a wider variety of biology into your system at home? Like you're in your winter time right now. What do you think are some of the plants that you would like to see the biology coming into your system from? Like what plants would be your top picks?
Man, well, where I'm at right now, the only thing I have access to basically is oak and manzanita leaves. Where I'm at, that's why I have going out on a walk and being able to go out into nature and picking up those things. So, like I said, what's growing in your area during the winter is something you'd want to utilize. That plant has that. It's evolved naturally to understand how to survive through a winter system. So if I was, like I said, if I was going to take some leaves here, there are evergreens here, and I could take those. Going down to the river system and collecting the horsetails that grow around that area all the time. I would want to have my hands on some of those. Willows. If you live in a forested area that has a ton of willows, they can handle high humidity. They're going to handle that lower light that's there because they've been doing that already, because they're down at the base of everything. You just really want to utilize what's alive in your area for that, if that's made it through there. Yeah. Otherwise, you want carbon. the most amount of carbon that you can get that's inoculated. And for me, that comes from leaves. So I would try to collect as much decaying leaf and decaying wood as I could for my compost piles. That's what I would want to get my hands on. Those are the two
Yeah.
most important things I feel that you could go out on a walk in nature and bring back with you. And you don't need a lot of it. You're only going to take a gallon baggie to put some in, and you can re-inoculate your whole system with fucking living fungi and bacteria from a local area. Just go take a walk with a loved one by yourself, ride a bike, go out there, take 2 gallon baggies and fill one up with leaf mold, and then find some wood that's starting to decay and try to peel back to that mycelium layer that's white in it, and take that home with you and utilize those in your system.
Yeah, like Shooter here, and welcome back, Shooter. Haven't seen you for a while. Good to see you back, bro. Alder for my carbon, and
Carbon,
POO, you know, and then of course
willow underbark,
bamboo
willow bark,
survives.
or
Yeah,
the very brand new shoots, ghetto hippie. The fresh shoots on there can be took and smashed up with a rubber mallet and soak that in just hot water, and you can root.
yeah,
You can
and
also
there's
break those down in the EM1 by doing like your regular EM1 mix, and then including 1/3 by volume of willow cuttings, or if you wanted some silica, you could use the horsetails, or your phosphorus and potassium by doing the same thing with, like I said earlier, with vegetable skins from like cucumbers or zucchini. Ferment those in there and utilize those as your cloning solution or liquid inoculants, and then use the solids left in there back into your compost system so that that carbon is saved. That's all
yeah,
we're looking for. Is carbon's the base. It's the number one nutrient that nobody talks about, and the plant's trying to make that more than anything and utilize it more than anything, more than nitrogen, more than phosphorus. It's the only thing it's designed to do is produce a sugar, which is a carbon. That's all that plant wants to do. And it wants to intake it. It wants to put it back out. It's trying to return it to a system in a larger amount than it took from it so that the place stays fertile.
hmm Well, and like I remember Tom Landry mentioning one of the cannabis plants that he was growing was picking up a particular nutrient more than anything else, and it was a nutrient they weren't really seeing much in the system on their soil tests. But this plant, when they sent it in for testing, had a higher level, not toxic, but a higher level, and that those are plants that we want to document so we know other plants that need that for their growth. We can take the plant that draws that nutrient up, give it back into our soil structure, and if we use the whole plant, or we're breaking it down, we're drawing the biology from that plant. Each plant has its own specific biology specific to that plant, and if we get into the cannabis, specific to the different cultivars as well. That's where Tony was saying earlier about taking that specific cultivar and feeding it back into that specific cultivar on the next generation. That's what Mother Nature would be doing in nature, dropping those leaves, dropping that stalk onto the ground. The biology would break it back down and give it to the next generation, because that's all plants really want to do. They want to do their job. They want to produce their young and have their young thrive in that environment. um, it's us that really gets in the way of a lot of this stuff happening, and that's where Tony has educated himself to such a depth on the amino acids and the other compounds that go into making up that plant and having it be healthy. And I, for one, I really appreciate all the knowledge that you're sharing with us, Tony. And there's a lot of people that gain this type of knowledge and don't share it back with people. And I really appreciate you, my friend, for being the open and honest human being that you are and giving back to us and this community.
Man, hoarded knowledge is not even knowledge. If you've never learned to share it, by the time you get it, then you never learn nothing to start with. Plus, I was digging for shit as a youngster. We didn't have the internet when I grew up. When I started all this shit, and even when we did, people weren't talking about it. I come from the era where talking about it gets you in trouble.
Yeah.
As it became legal, to me, legal didn't mean regulations. Legal meant now I get to be able to speak about this and talk about it, being open. And then I took that to heart. Like I used to stand in front of the city hall talking about who gets to have weed. I went to the meetings. I debated the city lawyers. And when that shit went away for me, I took to the internet. And now I do this for everybody here that'll listen. We've got to understand that if we don't talk about the things we wish we could do freely, they're never going to be something we can do freely, no matter what it is. From the games you play with your children to the activities you do with your friends. It doesn't matter what they are. If you have to hide them from everybody because of perceived notions that those things may be bad, and you don't take the time to prove that those things aren't, you're part of the reason why they're in that position. So when they told us cannabis could be legal and that we could have it for sick folks, my first thought wasn't I'm going to get paid for myself. I was like, I can produce cannabis for sick people. This is going to let them all know that cannabis works for medicine, and the pothead like myself has compassion. I'm not just a jackass. Because in the system, when Dennis Perone started, he wasn't paying you fucking tons of money for weed. You would either donate it or get it cheap because he was giving it to dying people for cheap. So I didn't get into this for making money. I did this for making friends and making a difference. That's why I started. So, and the only way I can continue that is right or wrong. If I share what I have and you double check it, you too can find out whether or not you were right or wrong about something. It's not about pointing out that I was wrong about a topic. It was about that I expanded your mind enough to go search out what the real truth was about it. A lot of things I speak on, I do know about. And sometimes I get it wrong. But the part when I get it wrong doesn't make the parts when I was right incorrect. It just means that I'm still learning, just like all of us. And that's what we should be doing when we talk about growing. Don't matter what you're growing. If you're not growing your own perspective at the same time, you don't have your shit dialed in. I'll just put it like that because that's things we always say. So be more interested in what you love. Love those that are interested in the same thing. And if we quit this pointing fingers at the bullshit, because we all have bullshit, we're all going to be broken and wrong at some point. That doesn't matter. But showing and telling everyone that shit's what's wrong with you. Well, if that's what you're always trying to do is point the finger at the person when they're wrong, that's how you fix yourself. You realize that and change it. And that's what I did. So that's why I share. I don't want anyone else having to fucking lose loved ones searching for how to grow a better cannabis plant or even a tomato, or how do I turn the soil that I was given at this spot into something that will give me a tree or food or a job. Like if you can become a farmer off a fucking piece of soil that you pick up and turn that into becoming a strawberry farmer, or you end up growing tomatoes, you could go from nothing to something just by having a little bit of knowledge. And that's what we all need. We learn it, we share it, and hope someone makes it better than we had so we can get better at it too.
Exactly. And like Pembina River says, we need a Tony download button to gather all that knowledge.
Man, if we share, we'll all learn.
Exactly.
We'll all learn. You just have to be interested in the topic at hand, man. There's so much info, with YouTube and the internet. You can become an expert at fucking anything you choose if you pay enough attention. Shut up and listen and watch, and then practice it when you're in your own free time. And when you get it wrong, go ask how to perfect it. Don't try to show off what you did. Learn how to do it right, and then share that shit. Because you're gonna fail way more than you make it until you figure that out. And then making it, you're like, this was so easy to begin with. Why did I fail?
You question like, where did I go wrong? I was doing the same stuff, but geez, I'm better at
mimic
it now.
Nature, man. Mimic nature. When did the forest fail? Until the human showed up. Think of that in your garden every time it's failing. Why is something so wrong here? It's because you're there fucking with the system too much the wrong way. Make some good soil, switch your system out, put your plants in there, and realize as soon as you did that and left, they grew better. Try to spend less time making them do what you want and spend more time in there enjoying what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do with our gardens. That's how you grow.
And that's where the love comes in, not only for the plant, but in the other people that you're helping. Like Broken Scepter says, it's not just for him, it's for the other broken people like him around him that he's able to help. And that's why Tony does this. It was for your father, for your mother, for your brothers, your sisters, your friends, you know, you know, I hate to say it, but you admit it yourself. You know, years ago, you weren't the guy that's helping you. You weren't the caring.
No, I was still hoping. I wouldn't help myself in the past is what I was. I was the most, I hated myself, and I was living that constantly. I was running from my own reality. I would help anybody else, but I hated me. I fucking hated me so much that fucking it was not good. And that me hating me meant I wasn't doing really much of shit for you. I was making you fucking in my shitty reality. And I was using cannabis as an escape method, not a way to fucking do what I'm doing today, which is give it back to everybody, because like I was broke and weed saved me. And people need to realize this before you lose all the broken people around you. You'll slowly start losing them. And then when you come to the realization in the end that the answer was always there, and it's always ourselves. If we would just change ourselves, none of that other shit matters. It doesn't matter if you smoke weed and I do too. If secretly I hate myself, we could get as high as we want, and it wasn't the right situation. We should not have been in this that way. I should be able to be free as myself around anyone doing the same. And I could never do that before. I had to have the herb to know that nobody was fucking with me. And I couldn't get that out of my head until I died. Then I fucking realized that I wasn't living. I just wasn't. It's hard to put that into context for people, but that's what happened to me.
Well, I like what Shooter says here. The only reasons we don't know something is the failure to ask the question, because that's it. Just you need to learn to ask better questions to get better results. But obviously, Tony, Mom needs you, brother. So we're going to cut the show there, guys. We're going to let Tony go and help Mom, because she's more important than I am, or
I gotta go up real
you
quick.
guys.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Love y'all.
Yep. I got to take off, y'all. Appreciate y'all much.